Tonight, we are sick with worry and we want you back. The family of a woman who's been missing for 5 months joined police to make an emotional appeal for information.
If anyone out there knows anything, please, I'm begging you, please come forward. We need to know where Kasia is.
Also making the headlines, George Galloway returns to Westminster as an MP with claims he'll make life uncomfortable for the Labour Party and change the outcome of the upcoming general election.
In sport, Celtic write to the SFA raising serious concerns over the refereeing in their controversial loss to Hearts.
And the hit musical Hamilton opens in Edinburgh and breaks box office records. I'm Kellyanne Woodland in Edinburgh.
And I'm John Mackay in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6.
Good evening. The detective leading the investigation into the disappearance of a woman from her home in Edinburgh almost 5 months ago says he can't rule out her having come to harm.
Today, the mother and daughter of 35-year-old Kasia Smith appealed for information, saying they are sick with worry and just want her back. Here's our senior reporter, Gordon Cree.
Kasia Smith had been living at this block of flats in Calder Grove. Today, windows there had been boarded up. Police now say she was last seen here on Tuesday the 10th of October, having ruled out a claim that she was safe and well in November. Her daughter has spoken for the first time about her disappearance.
I recently had my 18th birthday and didn't hear anything from my mum. She would never miss mine or my sister's birthdays or Christmas, and we just miss her so much. I would do anything for her to walk through the door and just to give her a big hug. It feels like I'm living the worst dream that we could ever possibly imagine.
Kasia was reported missing to the police in January. Since then, searches have taken place in the area around her home, as well as in nearby containers and the canal.
And it's been quite widely reported that she was living there with a relatively new partner. Has he been of any help to you?
So Kasia's relationships are all former part of the investigation. That's something that we're investigating at this time.
Do you have any reason to think that she's still alive?
So we have to be open to all possibilities. We have a number of hypotheses that could be the case in this investigation, and we have to investigate all of them equally. And obviously the possibility of her having come to harm is one possibility, yet we still maintain hope that she may be alive and that we can still find her.
Is it your kind of working hypothesis, though, that someone else has been involved in her disappearance?
We have to remain alive to all possibilities, and we'll continue to do so and investigate all possibilities of what might have happened to Kasia.
Detectives say they're now looking closely at Kasia's movements in the months before she went missing. As part of that, they're looking at activity on her bank account. They also say they can't go into detail about why they've been able to revise the date of when she was last heard from, but say no one has been interviewed as a suspect.
These past weeks have been horrendous. If anyone out there knows anything, please, I'm begging you, please come forward. We need to know where Kasia is. I'll never stop looking for her. I love her. I miss her. Please help bring Kasia home.
For months now, Kasia's family and friends have been desperate to know what happened to her. They can only hope today's appeal helps bring the answers they need. Gordon Cree, STV News, Edinburgh.
George Galloway has returned to Westminster as an MP, promising to make life difficult for Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party over the war in Gaza. The former Glasgow Labour MP pledged to work with the SNP on another vote for a ceasefire in Gaza.
He also claimed his supporters could change the outcome of the upcoming general election. Well, our Westminster correspondent Paris Gurtsianis was there. Paris, what did George Galloway have to say?
Well, Kellyanne, this was vintage George Galloway holding court for the cameras outside Westminster. And remember that Mr. Galloway was first elected as an MP 37 years ago in Glasgow Hill Head. And it's been 20 years since he was thrown out of the Labour Party over controversy about comments he made about the Iraq War. Since then, he's won seats off Labour 3 times, including in last week's Rochdale by-election. And today he was on typically controversial form, insisting the Israeli offensive in Gaza is a genocide and accusing Rishi Sunak of anti-Muslim rhetoric, things that are, of course, denied. I asked Mr. Galloway if he would work with the SNP on the Gaza issue. Here's what he said.
I certainly will work with the SNP to try and force a proper vote on a proper ceasefire. I'm not a supporter of the SNP, as you know, or their central cause of separation, but I think they've been outstanding on the Gaza question, at least by comparison with the 2 big parties of the state.
And Paris, what impact do you think George Galloway will have?
Well, he claims he can harness anger at the Gaza war to change the election. I think that's very unlikely. There's only one George Galloway. That's why he wins by-elections, but of course he's never been re-elected by voters in any of those seats. What this is for Labour is embarrassing. George Galloway is a walking, speech-making reminder to Labour that they had to ditch their candidate in Rochdale because of anti-Semitic comments. And he will exploit the very real tensions within Labour about the party's response to the conflict in Gaza. There's a great deal of concern at Westminster about the divisions here in the UK over the conflict in the Middle East. George Galloway can only make those divisions wider.
All right, Paris, thanks very much for that. Now, the First Minister is launching a framework to tackle toxic masculinity and misogyny in schools. Humza Yousaf says he's increasingly concerned about the problem as First Minister and as a father.
He met teenagers today who warned that social media is a big source of gender-based violence in schools, and the head teacher of a school where banter is banned. Here's our political editor, Colin Mackay.
The First Minister's key meeting today was with students at Moffat Academy.
So as well as being First Minister, I'm also a father of 2 girls, and we've got 1 girl or boy, we're not sure, on the way later this year. And my eldest is 14 in high school, and it can be a really difficult time.
He heard how it's increasingly difficult for young people to escape harassment on social media, with that spilling over into school.
Let's kickstart that conversation about what positive masculinity looks like. Let's talk about what are those toxic traits that we want to try to remove and weed out, but what are the positives about masculinity that we want to encourage our young boys and young men to talk about, be role models for others, because that's good for them in terms of their own well-being, but also helps to tackle gender-based violence, which we know disproportionately impacts young women and girls.
The government's framework to promote gender equality was developed by Rape Crisis Scotland and Zero Tolerance, but at Moffat Academy it's run by students, improving support throughout the school.
I think it's a massive problem, and it does need to be sorted because it can happen to any person as well. And there's not much, in other schools especially, there's not much support given.
Social media has a big part to do with it. There's way too much on social media.
Verbal abuse would probably be the biggest one, as well as on social media and whatever, behind a screen. It's so much easier to be abusive or whatever.
The head teacher says the whole atmosphere in the school has changed.
We are really avoidant of any kind of banter conversations where people say, oh, I was just kidding. That's not okay. We have to make sure that conversations between staff and young people are mutually respectful, supportive and inclusive.
But the EIS Teaching Union says that as well as a culture change, there must be consequences.
We're seeing behaviours from name-calling, small comments, jokes, banter, all the way up to attacks, harassment and things like that.
The Scottish Government says there's no place for harassment or abuse in Scotland's schools, but that doesn't stop it existing. This is an attempt to tackle it at its root. Colin Mackay, STV News.
To other stories, and a man has appeared in court charged with assault to severe injury and attacking a police officer after the death of a woman in Ayr. 70-year-old Kenneth Davis was arrested on Saturday after police were called to disturbance on Whitletts Road. He appeared at Ayr Sheriff Court today and made no plea. He's been remanded in custody.
More than 270,000 people missed a council tax payment last year. Citizens Advice Scotland has described the figure as alarming. The charity is warning people council tax arrears come with harsher consequences compared to other debts.
Organisations which help victims of rape and domestic abuse are to receive an extra £2 million from the Scottish Government. Rape Crisis Scotland and Scottish Women's Aid will use the funding to help reduce waiting lists. The two organisations helped more than 27,000 women and girls last year. The Royal National Lifeboat Institution, better known as the RNLI, is celebrating its 200th anniversary today. Volunteer crews have launched nearly 46,000 times across Scotland in that time, saving some 12,000 lives.
The charity is funded almost entirely by donations, while one volunteer, Thomas James Robertson, has experienced more than a quarter of the RNLI's history. Lewis Mickey reports.
Founded on the 4th of March 1824, the RNLI has been through 2 world wars and as a whole is responsible for saving more than 100,000 lives. RNLI Queensferry is one of Scotland's busiest stations. Since opening in 1967, the lifeboat has launched more than 2,000 times. Thomas has worked here for the majority of that, 50 of the 57 years. Joining back in those days was perhaps a slightly different process than it is today.
Wanted a small motorboat in the harbour in Queensferry, and the person in charge of the harbour was Jack Kersley, who was the honorary secretary of the lifeboat, unknown to me. So when I knocked on his door and he asked me, "Do you have any sea experience?" I said yes. He says, "If you want to berth in the harbour," he says, "come and see me at the lifeboat station next Monday."
There isn't much Thomas hasn't seen or done in his 5 decades with the RNLI. Even experiences which were stressful at the time have made for happy memories.
The night the Switha, the fishery protection vessel, ran aground in 1980 down at the end of Inchkeith. It was a very bad night indeed. It was actually nearly above our sea conditions. We hit one wave which pushed us right back and we lost one engine. We carried on, and then another half mile further down, we lost the other engine. So I think I'm the only person, along with my crew, who actually have sailed in the Atlantic by putting space blankets around the back of the boat and sailing it back up the river.
The RNLI as a whole across Scotland is called out to emergencies like this one 3 times a day. Made up mostly by volunteers, the RNLI is a charity which relies almost totally on donations. A lot has changed over the last 50 years. As Thomas explains, technology has advanced a fair bit since he first boarded a lifeboat.
My first boat here, we had a radio that worked occasionally, a compass, and that was it. All the crew, all the courses, going to places, we had to memorise, etc., and have in our heads. So nowadays they have radar, they have plotters, everything, so they really are very well equipped.
Lewis Mickey, STV News, Queensferry.
Well, Broughty Ferry on the River Tay is Scotland's busiest RNLI station, and Lynn Rankin is there for us tonight. Lynn.
Yes, Kellyanne. Joining me here in Broughty Ferry is Jill Hepburn, who heads up the RNLI in Scotland. Jill, 200 years of the service, a time for reflection.
It is. Today's a fantastic day. It's a chance to commemorate the 200 years of service, celebrate our volunteers in the present and hopefully inspire future generations to engage with the RNLI.
And generations of the same family do volunteer on crews around the country. What compels people to risk their lives to help others?
It's that selflessness, it's our true values, courage, dependency. We've seen generations of volunteers at Oban, Fraserburgh, Largs at Oban, and it's not just our volunteers, it's our supporters as well. We've seen that generational support across many years of our supporters.
Jill, thanks very much for joining us. Well, here in Broughty Ferry, a special service will take place tonight to commemorate the last 200 years and look to the future.
All right, Lynn, from Broughty Ferry, thank you very much.
Other stories in the West, and 3 people convicted of murdering a grandfather in a brutal attack have been jailed for a total of more than 50 years. Maria Gardner, Michael Anderson and James Houston killed Brian Maley at his flat in Springburn in February 2022. The trio were all given life sentences at the High Court in Glasgow. The woman has died after being hit by a car in Stirling. The 65-year-old was struck by a white Volkswagen Tiguan at 7:45 last night near Black Range roundabout on Alloa Road. She was pronounced dead at the scene. More than 100 jobs are to be created in Glasgow to provide nuclear reactors for attack submarines. Rolls-Royce Submarines says the jobs at the city's airport business park will focus on electrical controls and cyber security. Cleansing staff in Glasgow are warning there could be major disruption to bin collections and street cleaning across the city if councillors won't meet with them to discuss the challenges they're facing. The GMB union say 200 members of staff are off on long or short-term sick leave. Glasgow City Council say only 52 staff were off today. They've introduced a bin hub pilot scheme in some areas to address the staff's health and safety concerns, which is helping to keep the streets rubbish-free for residents. Vanessa Taff has more.
These bin hubs have been popping up in neighbourhoods across Glasgow. They're largely in response to health and safety concerns raised by refuse staff who, until now, have been collecting bins from this street in Hag Hill, from the back courts and lanes. The theory is that the bins will be emptied more frequently and quickly.
I do like them, I do prefer them. It's a lot more peaceful and quiet. I just want the peace and quiet now because it's just been going on and on and on and on. So this has resolved it.
I think it's very easy to have we have like separate garbage like paper, glass, plastics and the waste food. So I think this is like very great initiative.
Up to around 40 households can end up using these bin hubs, with the general waste emptied around every 4 days. Now, after pilots in other areas and feedback from local residents, there's no longer a key to access these. They can simply lift the lid and pop the rubbish in. But union bosses aren't happy. They had hoped to meet with councillors today to discuss their staffing and workload concerns, but say only 2 councillors attended.
They've weaponised health and safety. I do risk assessments every single day. That's my job to do that, and I make sure your members are treated safely. But these are getting used to make job cuts. We're going to see half the fleet and a reduction in staff.
We're cash starved. It's the Scottish Government that's cash starved Glasgow City Council. The council's got 3 of its own bin lorries, the rest are leased. So we've got no money to replace even tipper wagons.
Glasgow City Council told STV News that the GMB union has been repeatedly assured no one will be made redundant due to the introduction of the bin hubs, and that a recent recruitment drive for the refuse collection team has been successful. For now, this is a pilot scheme. If they're deemed to be working well, they could be rolled out to other areas of the city. Vanessa Taff, STV News in Glasgow's East End.
Some weekend in the Premiership, Raman, it was all happening.
Sure was, John, particularly at Tynecastle, as Hearts defeated the champions for a second time this season. But that's only half the story, folks. Celtic are unhappy with the performance of the officials and they've let their feelings known. Good evening. Celtic have written to the SFA raising serious concerns over the use of VAR and refereeing decisions during their defeat to Hearts. Yang was sent off for the champions. The club have appealed the red card, with Brendan Rodgers criticising the officials. The Scottish Senior Football Referees Association say they are extremely disappointed and concerned by another weekend of targeted and personalised criticism of its members. Ronnie Charters reports.
Another round of Premiership games, and once again it's officiating that's dominating the headlines. Brendan Rodgers labelled the refereeing display at Tynecastle yesterday as awful, as ref Don Robertson and VAR John Beaton were in the spotlight. This penalty to Celtic, this red card for Yang, and this penalty to Hearts. One former Parkhead boss says it was a bad afternoon for those in charge.
You have to say that all the decisions apart from the offside from Lawrence Shanklin were wrong. You know, I didn't think Celtic's was a penalty. I certainly didn't think it was a red card. And the penalty that Hearts got was, beyond belief, that decision for me. But certainly I think the referee's performance yesterday there has to be questions asked about that yesterday.
24 hours earlier, this challenge on Rangers winger Ross McCausland angered Philippe Clement. But Alan Muir decided it wasn't a foul, with VAR choosing not to intervene. One former Ibrox boss was scathing in his assessment of Scottish referees.
The referees are just not very good. And VAR compounds the problem for them. It shows them up. You know, when you get a chance to look at something time and time again, and from different angles, and you're still making the wrong call, and it's just showing them up in a bad light. It just shows them they don't know too much. VAR is just embarrassing them.
On the pitch, the gap remains 2 points. Rangers suffered a shock 2-1 defeat at the hands of Motherwell, moving the Steelmen within 2 points of the top 6 after their first League One at Ibrox in almost 30 years. 24 hours later in the capital, Celtic failed to capitalise, Hearts putting the champions to the sword in a 2-0 win, cementing Stephen Naismith's side's place in third spot. So where does this leave the title race?
Well, that's an almighty blow to Celtic this weekend, that they couldn't make ground up. Having Rangers seen the Rangers slip up the day before. Yeah, there will be fraught moments, but that's what you're in the game for when you're a club like Celtic or Rangers. You know, you're always under scrutiny, always under pressure to perform and win games, and this is the real sort of test now.
Ronnie Charters, STV News.
Now, after Hibs moved to 6th in the Premiership, former Easter Road boss Alan Stubbs says finishing in the top half of the table should be their minimum target this season. Nick Montgomery's side defeated Ross County 2-0 at the weekend. They are now unbeaten in their last 5 games.
I think, in all honesty, and in terms of where their budget is right now, I think top 6 is a minimum, you know, for them, even being honest. But from where they were to suddenly they've given themselves a chance of having a really strong finish, I think it's been a real positive for them.
Kilmarnock have appealed the red card shown to Lewis Mayo against Dundee at the weekend. With the score at 1-1, Mayo was sent off and the hosts were awarded a penalty, which they scored. Robbie Dees struck a late equaliser to earn Kelly a point. Elsewhere, St Mirren manager Stephen Robinson praised his players' character after their dramatic victory over Aberdeen. After going a goal down in the first minute, the Saints scored in the 96th and 97th minutes to win 2-1. They are now 4th in the Premiership. And Livingston drew 1-1 against St Johnstone. Athletics, and after winning gold at the World Indoor Championships in Glasgow, Josh Kerr says he's determined to produce more top performances and win more medals. It was also a successful weekend for Gemma Reekie, who won a silver medal in the 800 metres.
The crowd are on their feet. Their champion is coming home.
Storming to glory in the 3,000 metres final in front of a passionate home crowd, Josh Kerr ended Scotland's 31-year wait for an indoor title. It comes 5 months after Kerr won gold at the World Athletics Championships in Budapest. And in less than 6 months' time, he'll be aiming to win gold at the Paris Olympics.
I think I've shown that I'm, a prominent person on this stage, and, I'm going to continue to hopefully put performances that I can be proud of and bring medals back to my team. And, that's my big goal, and that's why I get put on these championship teams.
How much confidence will this give you as a springboard to the Olympic Games?
Yeah, it's turning up at these championships and performing, and that's what I do. It's what I love to do. It's the reason I'm in this sport, is these big moments, and when the pressure's on and the lights are on, I chuck my shades on and have a good time.
Last night, Gemma Reekie won her first major medal of her career. After finishing second in the 800 metres, clocking 2 minutes 2.27 seconds, Reekie says the race was a good lesson, as Ethiopia's Tiziki Duguma triumphed in a tactical battle. 24 hours earlier, Laura Muir finished 5th in the 3,000 metres final. Muir set her best time of the season, and she believes the race was good preparation for the Olympics.
It's still a stepping stone towards the Olympics, and I want to get things right for the summer, and so that's why the 3K worked right now, to test my endurance ahead of the summer, but I'll be looking forward to getting back to 1500s. It's going to be tough, the Olympics, that's what everybody wants, but it's the first time I'm going in as an Olympic medalist already. I'm silver from Tokyo, so I'm in a very unique position where I've been there and done it before, which I think gives you a lot of confidence knowing you've already done it, so I want to go back and hopefully bring back another one.
That, folks, is all your sport tonight. I'll see you again tomorrow.
Thanks, Rahman. Well, it's been a lovely, bright day. Hopefully more to come. Here's Sean with the forecast.
Well, we've had a good spell this winter on and off of the Northern Lights last night. Another great example of them, seen all the way down to southern parts of England in some spots. So a fantastic showing. We are now heading towards the peak in a solar cycle. So if you haven't seen them this winter, don't worry. Next winter, I think, will be very good for the Northern Lights, and then we'll see a dwindling of them over the next 4 to 5 years. It does look as if activity generally of the aurora is starting to wane a wee bit over the next couple of days, and of course our skies will be getting a little bit lighter as we head closer to the summer solstice. Let's see what's in store weather-wise this week.
A spell of sea air will be followed by a strong chance of you have to try these. TUI sponsors STV Weather.
Well, let's have a look at how the rainfall is going to tot up this week, and there's going to be plenty of it around for England and Wales and also across Ireland. For us, yes, there will be some rain, but we've got high pressure to the top right of your screen there. Low pressure in the Atlantic. Remember, it's low pressure that brings wind and rain, so stay out there. We've got high pressure across Scandinavia. The two of them battling each other a bit, so we get a little bit of rain, but it's the high pressure that wins later on in the week, and we should see plenty of dry weather around during the week. A little bit of rain to come through during this evening and tonight. Temperatures rising a little bit later on as well, 5-6 degrees Celsius, also turning a little bit breezier later on the night too. So tomorrow morning it should be a dry, bright start to the day, so a fine start, spring-like again. However, it will be quite chilly. Out west, another weather front coming in, so a bright start to the day, not too bad, but by lunchtime most of us have got cloud, we've got outbreaks of rain again, so quite damp, but then we see some good spells of sunshine developing across Argyll and also the Hebrides later on the day. Top temperatures 9-10 degrees Celsius, that's about 50 degrees in Fahrenheit, so the best of the weather tomorrow, certainly in the morning, damp in the afternoon, although a wee bit brighter in the far west by the end of the day. Wednesday and Thursday I expect we'll see some good spells of sunshine here in the west, especially further west, although it will be quite windy at times, but if you can get out of that wind in that sunshine, again, not feeling bad with highs up to around 10 or 11 degrees. A little bit colder though as we head to the weekend. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV Weather.
And finally, the award-winning show Hamilton has opened in Edinburgh's Festival Theatre, and it's already the fastest-selling show in the venue's history.
The musical has captivated audiences with its portrayal of American founding father Alexander Hamilton, and with the main character having links to Scotland. The cast say performing in Edinburgh feels like they're bringing the show home. Vanessa Kennedy has more.
I want to be in the room where it happens, the room where it happens.
It's one of the most celebrated shows in recent history, and with a musical score blending hip-hop, jazz, blues, rap, R&B and Broadway, it's become famous across the globe. The show tells the story of America's founding father Alexander Hamilton as he battles his political rival Aaron Burr.
First night, I almost forgot my lines because I talked about Hamilton being Scottish, and it hadn't dawned on me how much that would ring true, of course, in Edinburgh. And so just the responses are slightly different, you know, Hamilton being of Scottish descent, and I think the audience is just, they really love theatre. It's unlike any other audience I've ever experienced. It really is.
Hamilton became George Washington's right-hand man during the Revolutionary War. The story explores culture, politics and education in a spectacular performance.
It's very, very fast-paced. So from the second the show opens, you're straight into massive big numbers and into an incredible story that's very human as well as historical. And it's just captured people's imaginations. The set's amazing, the company are incredible, and you really learn the story of the history of the founding fathers of America through it.
And for people working at the theatre, the popularity of this performance is like nothing they've seen before.
I started 29 years ago tomorrow, and in that time I've never known on sale like it. It's been unprecedented, the amount of tickets we sold for Hamilton.
There are just a few remaining tickets for the show that runs here until the last weekend of April. Vanessa Kennedy, STV News Edinburgh.
Oh, brilliant. It just makes you want to get up and rap, doesn't it, John?
Maybe you, it just makes me want to wrap up. It's very impressive, I have to say. Anyway, we are wrapping up here. From all of us, thank you for watching. Have a good night.
Good night.